Good afternoon. I'm Greg Ferris with Booth Bay Sea and Science Center, and I have the pleasure this afternoon to be here at the shipyard at Booth Bay Harbor with Eric Graves and Ross Branch. Eric is the Vice President of the shipyard, and Ross is the Director of Operations. Here at the shipyard, they work primarily on large wooden ships, restoring and building vessels. So let's get started. Eric, where were you born?
Yeah, I was born in Western New York. Grew up summers on the Finger Lakes in central New York State, and went to high school in Connecticut and spent a lot of time on the coast of Connecticut.
What was your first job?
Out of engineering school from Buffalo State University, I started working with a friend of mine in Buffalo on mahogany runabouts and 1920 racing boats for a couple years, and then moved to Maine in 1994 to be a marine engineer for a naval architecture company for Bath Iron Works on the Navy destroyers.
Did you go to college?
Went to Buffalo State University for an engineering and drafting degree and a minor in boat design and construction.
Okay. And so why did you choose that as your degree?
So growing up in the Finger Lakes, being on the water, sailing, windsurfing, fishing, really got interested in marine life and watercraft. And at Buffalo State, we had a boat design and construction minor program. So I got involved in that, building small boats and kayaks, and spent a lot of time in the shops there, and then did a minor summer study at the Wooden Boat School up in Brooklyn, Maine.
So I have a question from Nat McKenna. Which is harder to build, traditional or modern boats?
I guess I would say they all have their challenges, right? There's different materials, different forms that you're shaping the materials to. So with the large framework, like in the vessel Ernestine and Morrissey, it's massive construction, wood construction. So I would say traditional construction's more time consuming, more challenging, dealing with different types of materials and the complex shapes in a hull form.
Okay. Which material do you prefer to work with? Bartlett Lockwood would like to know.
I guess all material is great because everybody has their craft. My personal favorite is wood. It's just different materials coming together and using many different types of tools to shape the pieces of wood into the form, where steel is a little more challenging maybe in bending plate and welding. Fiberglass and foam core construction is another fun method that you're taking form and creating shapes and then covering it in resin and fiberglass, which is another craft that's all hands-on. So the craftsmen, the builders, and the different type of trades, it's just another medium that is all fun and challenging.
Bartlett Lockwood would also like to know, when building wooden boats, how do you keep the water from coming in?
Good question. You can kind of see here is a great example. This is 3-inch thick white oak planking from the Royal Forest in Denmark. You can see the planking seams here between a 6 or 8 inch wide plank. The seam actually is a tight seam with the wood at a certain moisture content, and then cotton and oakum is pounded in that seam, and then a seam compound to smooth that over. When the wood expands, when it's back in the water, it really creates a longitudinal structure that really binds that cotton and oakum together along with the plank. So it's a really, really tight and long-lasting seam that keeps the water out.
Elijah Smith would like to know, what is the largest size of ship that your shipyard is equipped to work on?
So we're standing on the railway car here. It's a 120-foot long car. We can handle up to around 150-foot vessel, upwards of 700 tons.
What are some of the current projects at the shipyard?
The main project here is Ernestine and Morrissey, which is for the state of Massachusetts. Ross is going to give a great tour today for you guys as well. It was built in 1894 as a fishing schooner and has a great history of Arctic exploration, packet transport for goods and immigrants to this country as late as the 1960s from Cape Verde off of Africa. We've got a couple other projects ongoing with smaller wooden yachts and possibly some other government contracts for replica vessels, museum type vessels. And also just completed a job last year on the schooner Bowdoin from Maine Maritime Academy and the steamship Katahdin up on Moosehead Lake. So been really focused on traditional classic old vessels.
Okay, great. Ross, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into this industry?
Sure. I'm a summer kid here in Boothbay Harbor, and I stayed year-round about 25 years ago. My family had a small business here in town, and I grew up sailing in that business. My grandfather had me scraping and painting handrails when I was a young kid, and then I was doing repair work to porches and then building porches. And then I decided that I wanted to combine my newfound interest in construction with my longtime interest in being on the water and boats. I knew I wanted to go to boat building school, and I did at the apprentice shop in Rockland in 2001, finishing in 2002, but decided that I wanted to have some professional experience ahead of that. So I went to work on Southport for David Nutt. I worked for David for 1 year. David then sold the business and sailed around the world with his family for 5 years. Sounds pretty good. And then I worked for Doug Goldhirsch, who bought the business from him for a year. And then I went to school. And I have enjoyed every minute of the last 20 years of being in boat construction.
What is the material that you prefer to work with?
Live oak from southern Georgia. Live oak is an extremely dense species of oak. Of the white oaks, there are, what, a couple of hundred?
Right.
A couple of hundred different species of white oak, and live oak is one of them. And it actually is so dense that if you take a chunk and drop it in the water, it sinks. And its grain is not straight and longitudinal like regular white oak or spruce or pine. It knots and swirls, and so it's extremely good for a project like this. We use live oak for cutting for frames, especially the ones that had the largest curves, because again, if you're trying to cut a curve out of a straight grain piece of wood, that grain can run out and then it creates a weak breaking point. But if you're using something like live oak, there is no weak point, and not many people use it, and it's very, very difficult to work, and so I like that aspect of it.
Yeah, great. I guess one of the processes in this vessel here is just the wood is amazing, and it's living history that we're finding this royal oak from Denmark, up to 40-foot lengths. It was planted 200 years ago for naval ship construction, so generations maintained the forest, and it was never utilized for that purpose. And they selectively cut it and utilize it for projects like this all over the world. So it's just an interesting, rare thing that has history in itself, and it's living, right? So it's just a product that is just amazing to be able to have as a resource. You can kind of see some of these planks just stretch out almost 40 feet with barely any knots in it, and it's the best oak in the world for a ship hull. So it's pretty fun.
Mariah Smith would like to know how many people are needed working as a team to build a boat like this?
So currently in this phase of construction, we have 10 people on the project. To get to where we needed to where we are today, we averaged about 15. We're actually starting to ramp back up to that number of 15. It's a 112, 120 foot boat. So you can only get so many people on it at once, and 15 feels like a good number for this project.
Speaking of projects, what are some other projects currently underway at the shipyard?
currently underway? Well, one of the things that we're doing here at the shipyard, about 2.5 years ago, we were purchased by an out-of-state corporation, another boat company called Bristol Marine. They have 2 locations originally from Bristol, Rhode Island and Somerset, Massachusetts. And Andy Tiska, when he purchased the property, said, you know, I'm going to turn this place around. We'd fallen a little bit on hard times. We'd still been able to get things done, but our infrastructure kind of suffered as a result of deferred maintenance. So currently, we are just about done rebuilding our 193-foot pier. We're doing all that work ourselves. If we can, we had pilings driven by a local contractor, Chuck Fuller, but everything else we've done ourselves. So in addition to the Ernestina and our storage vessels and looking after other work, we have been in the process of completely going through redoing our joiner shop, redoing a lot of our interior facilities, and now we're really just about done redoing this pier work. And it's very important for the long-term success of this company to have a well-maintained infrastructure.
Yeah, and with Bristol Marine and Andy's, dedication to this yard, the yard's been here since 1869, where this whole kind of Point Peninsula to the west was all shipyard, varying from, tall ships back in the turn of the century to the war effort in the 1940s with Navy vessels and minesweepers. To this niche that we have right now, it's just great to have an owner really focused on what we've established and to take it into the next 50 years. So that's the goal here, is to keep doing this really interesting, niche of large wooden ships and small wooden yachts. This winter we hope to be doing some work on Bella Venture, which we did a big restoration here 10 years ago. And she's a 1925 Fife, 84 feet long, and we're hopeful that Hodgson Yachts will help us with the project, storing the vessel in the water and doing some work here come spring.
Awesome. 2 more questions. What have been your most gratifying projects?
For me, I guess it would be the Ernestina Morrissey. This is my 13th year being involved with this vessel. For the Department of Conservation and Recreation for Massachusetts, I've worked with a dozen people over 13 years in, estimating, budgeting, bidding on a few contracts. This is our 4th contract here, this phase of this part of the restoration over that many years, and the challenges of funding, material sources. She's now going to go to Massachusetts Maritime Academy as a cadet training vessel with similar programs to the schooner boat. So hopefully those 2 academies can team up together and see the vessels sailing together again in the Arctic someday soon.
What advice would you offer to young people who are interested in a career in this industry?
Just start doing stuff. Just start getting into, if you're interested in wooden boats specifically, see if you can get yourself into some boats. See if you can go sailing, rowing. Just start noticing how they're put together. Start fooling around with little projects. Building a toolbox. Building a sled for the wintertime. Start familiarizing yourself with tools. Go and see if you can volunteer somewhere. There's programs through the Wooden Boat School, and who knows? I mean, a lot of places like the shipyard here, if there was a kid graduating from high school that said, look, I don't have any experience, but I'm really interested in this, here at the shipyard, we're going to support that. And we'd love to bring people in who have a genuine interest. And I think there are a lot of people that want to support that same interest throughout the various boat building companies in Maine.
Yeah, and no matter what young people want to do or what their interests are developing in as they're working in a trade or going to school, I recommend just give it your all. Find an interest, which is great, but no matter what you're doing, if you're working hard, showing really strong work ethic, interest, motivation, it's going to help you build confidence. It's going to help you open doors to opportunities. And like Ross said, just get out there and do it. And if you put in the effort, you know, you're going to see results and opportunities open up for you, because you know you're going to stand out from other young people, and you're going to have a greater depth of opportunity, knowing you're a hard worker, knowing that you want to do well, knowing that you want to grow, and you know, you just work your way up the ladder. You know, I never thought about running a shipyard and working with talented people like Ross and others, you know, coming to a group as a team when I was your age, right? Because you're not picturing yourself down the road, but that all comes with experience and growth and hard work and determination. So it's a path to where we've been dreaming about for 20 years.
Both of you guys are very involved in the Booth Bay Sea and Science Center. Can you guys talk a little bit about your involvement?
Sure. Let's see. I'm on the board. I came on a year and a half ago, I guess. My daughter, Jackie, loves the Booth Bay Sea and Science Center. She loves the sailing and the programming, and it's been great to watch her. You know, when she first started out, she was a little unsure about swim tests and other things, but the Booth Bay Sea and Science Center is a wonderful, nurturing program that builds confidence in children. And through watching my daughter and the rest of the kids, I have seen that happen, and it happens fast. And it is just such a pleasure to see these young people essentially coming out of their shells and gaining confidence and gaining the ability to realize that there are always going to be challenges in life, but they're developing the tools to meet those challenges and succeed. So yeah, it's a great program that I feel strongly about.
Yeah, and you know, we started it here at the shipyard, I can't even remember, 9 years ago now?
2013.
2013. So my son Nathaniel was 12 years old, and same thing. He started, you know, sailing here, a little unsure of it all, and then, you know, just it takes hold of you, right? You gain the confidence right off when you can steer that boat or hoist the sail or, you know, keep the boat from tipping over. So that, I think, gets your brain hooked, gets you thinking about things differently, and, you know, draws you in, right? So I think, you know, what we accomplished over these years, and the other great thing that we never thought about was college age kids, right? You know, how is this also benefiting their future and benefiting their opportunities and confidence moving forward? That's why we have all you guys here this summer, is because, you know, even though we don't have the little kids here, we thought very highly of, you know, making this work for you guys. So it just helps you, you know, move forward and gives you that opportunity that, you know, some kids have lost out on this summer. The shipyard, you know, hopes to in the future develop more, you know, educational programs. I know it's a real focus for Andy Tiska to get another program going for boat building and the trades. So I think it's just another opportunity for this community to really offer young people from ages 5 to 25 to have some incredible opportunities with collaborating with, you know, Hodgdon's or Bigelow Labs or Nat Wilson, and all these really great groups of people that have fulfilled their dreams living in this community, and all the other people that have moved on from here all over the world, you know, started their path here. Co-founder with Pauline, and we started it here along with over at Watten's Wharf of Hodgson Marina, and I'm vice president on the board for the entire time here, and we've had some great board members. We had Ross come on a few years ago. We've got Nat Wilson on the board, several other great people, Nicole from Bigelow Labs, and we're hoping to get more of that community involvement with more talented people to help with the path at the center.
Well, that is a great note to end on. Thank you so much for sharing your time with us.
So So here we are at the shipyard in Boothbay Harbor, part of Bristol Marine. Behind me is the schooner Ernestina Morrissey. She was originally built in 1894 in Essex, Massachusetts, to be part of the Gloucester fishing fleet. She would go out and catch fish, load it into the giant fish hold, and come back. These boats generally would pay for themselves within the first couple of trips because of the dangerous nature of the work and because of their fast ability to pay themselves back. These things did not have a long life expectancy. If these boats lasted 10 years, it was actually a little bit surprising. Part of the reason that these boats failed and didn't last was that the planking, and this is a wood plank on a wood frame, the planking would have been fastened with iron spikes. Those spikes would then have rusted and created a rotten circle right at the plank, and then those would fail and you could spring a plank and then the boat would sink. This boat is gone through many different phases in its life. We'll focus on where it's headed, which is Massachusetts Maritime Academy for their cadet training program. So some structural changes have been made to make the boat more seaworthy and stable. Some design changes have been made. The old framing was 6 inches square, double sawn. So what that means is that if you have one frame here, there's another one that lays right beside it. And the reason for double sawn construction is that the frames travel from the keel all the way up to the shear line. Now, there is no one piece of wood that could make that entire distance and make that shape. So what we do is we take a short piece, say 6 to 8 feet, we cut it to the shape of the boat, it lays in, but then the one that's next to it crosses the joint. So you have to make these up with multiple pieces, and they're butting end to end. So the one that lays next to it spans that joint so that there's no weak or hinge point there. So that's what double sawn frame construction is. The old framing was 6 inches square, double sawn, so 6 by 12 from top to bottom. Now at the bottom it's 12 and it tapers up to 6. So you have this much stronger frame. There's also an enlarged internal keel structure called a keelson. There's thwartship floors, a lot of sort of technical stuff. But the other and probably most important change that was made is the ballast keel. Oftentimes boats like this carry internal lead ballast, and this one was no different. It had 112,000 pounds of internal lead ballast in the form of 55-pound lead pigs. So when she first showed up, all of that was removed. So instead of the entire 112 going back in, what's been added are 4 15,000-pound blocks. And here's one right here. So you can see this joint. This is a scarf joint. So this block goes from here to right back there. That's 15,000 pounds. So there's 4 of them. So that's a total of 60,000 pounds. So essentially what you've done is you've taken over half the weight and moved it 2 feet lower. So for any of you that are sailors, you know that what this will do is it'll help your righting moment and lower your center of gravity and allow you to handle more wind and not be as tender. Be interesting to see how she sails after this. Another one of the changes that was made, all of the planking, as Eric said before, is 3 inches thick, but to accommodate this extra weight hanging off the bottom of the boat, because that's essentially all it's doing, and when the boat heels, that weight, it really wants to come back down. So there's a lot of shear force on the 1 1/8 inch bronze carriage bolts that we have, 2 at every 2 feet. And so trying to beef up this centerline structure with the 3-inch planking here, 4-inch thick broad strake, and 5-inch thick garboard. And those are those are fastened to the frames, but they're also edge fastened into the keel and then from the broad into the garber. It's just trying to create this really rugged, rigid backbone structure to accommodate that extra weight. You can see the black dripping out. It's just tar. It's just bedding the wood to the lead, or in this case up here, that's actually wood to wood. Master cabin, so the captain, the first mate, the engineer, and the cook will be in this space, so just 4. The nav station will be in there. I'll have a shower in there, a head in there. We're outfitting this boat to Mass Maritime Academy desire, so this thing will be able to take 32 people on board without revisioning out to sea for 6 weeks at a time. So this boat will have all the water tankage, waste tankage, gray water tankage, ability to take frozen food, fresh food, and obviously a bunk for everybody. So, you know, she's quite the vessel in that sense. There's 4 main compartments. As I said, this is the captain's. The next one forward is the engine room. This boat originally was built with no engine, but it got an engine when Bob Bartlett, who was the Arctic Explorer, got it and started doing explorations with it. We're just starting phase 2. So phase 1 of this project was the hull and the deck. Now we're doing all the interior. So if you look down there, you see that piping. You can actually see it's got some labels on it: aft cabin, engine room, fish hole, forepeak. That's the bilge manifold. So that's all red brass, which is really, really good, really expensive pipe that won't rust. And so that's for pumping the boat out when it gets rainwater or, heaven forbid, should get some kind of leak. The plywood that you see down there is a temporary sole or floor, and you can kind of see the engine vents there. This boat will get a large Cummins diesel, single diesel. We'll also have 2 generators, one on port, one on starboard, for day-to-day operations. This boat is a sailboat. It is a schooner. A schooner is a 2-masted vessel with the larger mast aft of the forward mast. This is one of the mast partners here. This is the pin rail. This is the, that's where the mast actually goes through the deck. She's a topsail schooner, so she will fly tops. So she's gaff rigged, so she has a boom and a gaff, and then the fore has a boom and a gaff, and each one has a top. She's got a jib and a staysail, and I think she's got some kind of flying jib too. This is the hatch for the engine room. So this one comes off, this one that's being built can come off, that one does not come off. These are some of the nicer details. It looks a little dirty and dusty, but you know, these boats were work boats, but they really tried to provide some, you know, appealing details like this double bull nose for the cap rail, the bulwark cap. I mean, these are traditional. We didn't just decide to do that. That's how these things would have been done. And so this just, you know, here it is reoccurring here for the pin rail. It's just a lot of small, subtle details. These boats were also, if you look at the lobster boat races of today, these boats were just like that. They used to race these boats. And when Ernestina, originally when she was built, she was the FEM Morrissey. When she was built, they were kind of plateauing on refining the design and construction for these boats. So this boat is just super fast. There's not a lot of schooners of this size that are as fast as she is. Moving forward, there's a break in the deck, which means there's a step down. This compartment here would have been the fish hold. So this will be the main cabin. This will have the most crew members in it. It'll also have the dining room table, some storage for equipment for sailors. Ahead of that is the forecastle, which will also have crew members in it, but it will also have the galley in it. It's a full-time job for someone to feed 32 people 3 meals a day, sometimes more. Just beyond the entrance to the forecastle, this is the entrance here. That's a hatch. Is the second of the 2 mast partners. This boat, if you look all the way forward, there's 3 holes. There's 2 on the side and then 1 in the middle. The 2 on the side are for the dock lines or the chain for the anchor. And then the one in the middle is the sloop. The bowsprit on this boat is 58 feet long. It's enormous. In order to do projects like this, because we don't want to be up and down off the boat all the time, we keep machinery on deck. So we got a table saw here. She's got Douglas fir decks. You can see this absolutely gorgeous oiled Douglas fir. And if you look at it and you see these really thin stripes, that's the tight old growth Douglas fir. This Douglas fir came from Vancouver Island, British Columbia, and it's all vertical grain. So if you saw the big rays running the other way, that's flat sawn. But when it's vertical like this, it's actually a lot more stable. It doesn't want to shrink and swell as much. And so vertical grain for a deck is very important because decks are constantly getting wet, and then they're constantly getting beat in the dry sun all day long. Most vessels like this try and do regular saltwater washes to try and keep that deck swelled up so that it doesn't leak. In some vessels, the stanchions, which these are called, are in fact extensions of the frame. The way that we have done it, the stanchions are not. They are individual pieces of wood that go down in between the other frames. We felt that that was a better way to go because wooden boats rot from the deck down, from the freshwater. Another reason why the saltwater washes happen. And so if you have stanchions that are individual pieces, if they begin to rot, they can be replaced without having to affect frames and then hull fastenings. Otherwise, it can become a little bit more of a job.
Are there any parts of the boats that are original?
That is a great question. I'm sorry I forgot to talk about that. No, there's not one piece of wood. The steering wheel is original. There are some hardware pieces that are original, but there is no wood left in the boat that's original. The boat has gone through many different rebuilds. Some things from some rebuilds. The coaming, the white piece of wood here, is from the Cape Verdean rebuild in the 70s. The stem, the very leading edge piece of wood, is also from that rebuild. The deck that you guys are standing on is from the rebuild that we did in 2008. Otherwise, everything else is brand new. We brought the boat up, we cut the back half off of the boat, we put it in the dumpster, we put the new keel underneath it, we built the back half of the boat, we cut the front half off, suspending the deck, and we built the front half of the boat. So it's a brand new boat. She will splash with her rig in, so this cover that we've constructed over the boat will have to come off. The mast will get stepped. She'll go in the water. She'll have what's called an incline test. They'll actually lean her over to check her stability. We'll do a lot of sea trials. We'll finish out any remaining details. This boat has meant so much to so many different people, and currently it means a tremendous amount to the employees and the staff and the owners here at the shipyard. And we're very, very proud of it. The planking for this construction got fastened in 2 separate ways. One was the very, very traditional method of trunnels. These circles here, so we use black locust. You can also see them going through the sides of the frame. That's how the frames got fastened together to each other. And we keep the black locust in a refrigerator with a light bulb, so it's not actually cold, it's actually hot. And it dries the trunnels out, and when wood dries, it shrinks. So we drill a hole for the fastening that's a little bit too small, so the trunnel has to be pounded in. But then once it gets pounded in, it's going into this wetter, much wetter, and then when the boat hits the water, even much more wetter area, and so it swells, and that trunnel just locks into place. We also, if you look, you can see a little line slash through it. We also then make a little notch, and we pound another little locust wedge into that. So that's one of the ways it gets fastened. The other way is the planking got fastened with custom-made bronze screws to the tune of about $30 a piece. Bronze as opposed to galvanized because it won't rot the way iron will, and therefore should significantly extend the life of the vessel. One of the other structural changes that was made, as I mentioned, there were quite a few, is the old boats would have had big knees. Knees are typically cut out of tree roots so that the grain follows the tree down and follows the root out. Hackmatack is often used. And so you might have a piece of wood that went from here, came down, and that grain follows, and it goes against the hull. So it's like a triangle, but with continuous grain. Then there'd be knees that went from here, out, and over. These are hanging knees, these are lodging knees. They're not nearly as strong as what we ended up doing, which is this clamp and shelf construction. What you've got is you've got a full-length longitudinal stack of lumber that's then all bolted together, catching the hull and catching the deck beams all at the same time, all through bolted. So it's very, very strong. And additionally, you see that same construction here and here in the bilge stringers. This boat would have originally had, and did when we took it apart, what's called a full ceiling. So a lighter interior planking. But this change was made because another way in which boats can suffer is they just don't breathe well enough. You get all these locked up places where moisture is, and boats just develop rot pockets, they just get wet, they stay wet. So the idea behind this heavy bilge stringer construction is that, as you can see, it leaves a lot of places for air to circulate around, which is, again, going to really be helpful. What we're holding on to here, what Jackie's leaning against, is framing for a bulkhead. So we've got that vertical piece there, that's the crash bulkhead. The one behind us, behind Pauline, that's the watertight bulkhead into the engine room. And this will be a watertight bulkhead separating the forecastle from the fish hold. That means that this is the back of a watertight section, so we've got concrete poured down in here to help limber the water from bay to bay, but it can't pass from the forecastle to the fish hold. So this section here, which is at the lowest end, has no concrete in it because that's where one of the bilge pump pickups will be. We saw that bilge manifold before. So this is where it'll actually be sucking out of. All of the bilge system in this boat can be operated either by hand or run off the engines. You can sleep in there. There'll be bunks on the sides. You can start to see some of the partitions for bunks here. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There'll actually be 2 more in this space. So there'll be 10, 11, 12 people sleeping in the forecastle. There'll be a big dining room table. Here's where the foremast comes down. The table will actually be right around that foremast. It'll come out into here. So right in front of this, this bunk here will be a bench seat. And again on the other side. So this table will sit, I don't know, like 10 people or something. So I started out We have a master shipwright on the project named David Short, and I worked closely with David from day one. We actually lofted the boat, which means we drew a full-size picture of the boat. And then I was involved in doing the backbone and structure and cutting frames. And then I cut a lot of the deck timbers and stuff. We got to do fiberglass tanks for the aft wastewater and aft gray tanks. And the tanks are too large to fit constructed through any of the openings. So we're having all the panels cut out of fiberglass panel. Then I'll bring the panels in one at a time, and then I'll fiberglass them all together inside the space and drop them into place. Fuel, I can tell you exactly, 2 500-gallon tanks. Water, I don't have that figure right in my head, but I would say somewhere between 9 and 1,200 gallons. But we'll also have a reverse osmosis machine for the ability to make water. There's 2 types of wood in the frames. There's white oak and there's live oak. This piece here is live oak. So in every frame section, well, let's just say on one side of the boat, there's 1, 2, so there's like 2 pieces of live oak in every one. And the way we cut the regular oak is on the ship saw. The frames are different at every frame station because the shape of the boat goes from being narrow at the bow to swelling in the middle to narrowing back up. So each body section changes in its shape. But along the length of every frame, the angle changes because at the top of the boat, it's coming like this. The bottom of the boat, it's coming like this. So that angle or bevel changes during the length of that frame. That's called a rolling bevel. So we have a ship saw that takes 4 people to operate, in which you're pushing a piece of slab wood through it, and the head tilts. The table stays flat and the head tilts, so the blade itself, which would be vertical, cutting a 90-degree, as you start cranking the handle over, the whole head turns. So you can cut this changing bevel, this rolling bevel, while you're pushing it through. You cannot cut live oak on our ship saw. Our ship saw turns at too high of an RPM. What happens is the resinous nature of the live oak causes it to liquefy, and then it flashes off, so it dries onto the blade and begins to cake up. If the cake builds up on the blade past the set of the teeth, the blade can't cut anymore. And so I took a chainsaw and then mounted what's called a Haddon lumber maker, which is this thing for like an Alaska sawmill, but slightly different. And then I created a series of blocks for bevel changes, and then I screwed track to that, and then I could ride my chainsaw vertically over the slabs of wood, so the chainsaw would be changing angle as I was cutting. Now, I ended up having the wonderful opportunity to do the Bowden project as well, and I cut all the frames, white oak and live oak, for that. And I ditched that whole track system and just used 2 blocks screwed directly to it. When you're cutting, there's 2 different bevels. There's either a standing bevel, which means that the number is beyond 90, or there's an under bevel, which means the number is under 90. So what I was doing was I was picking if I had like a 15-degree bevel, but it went from like 13 to 17. If I use that 17 number, I could just cut the full run of them at 17 degrees, because you have to do a little cleanup work with a hand power plane. So it was just quicker to try and bevel off that extra. And then again, the opposite was true for the under bevel. I could just pick the lowest of the numbers, because then I could always just plane more bevel into it. So it's gotten pretty good. I've gotten relatively proficient at it. And it's nice because a job that normally takes 4 people, I can do by myself.